Hi, I'm Zoe Binning, and I wanted to take a few moments today to tell you a little bit about my eco journeys and my why, and how that's translated across my businesses, and still ensure that if you put people and planet ahead of profit, then the profit will still come. My background is in wedding planning. I've worked in the wedding industry for many, many years, but how has this evolved into what I'm doing today? Well, my challenge was to myself in my personal life, my family life, to combat the amount of, basically to combat the ever-evolving climate crisis that we see before us. And we did this in a number of ways. We did this by reducing our single-use plastic. We committed to buying secondhand whenever and wherever we could. We got an allotment, so it's a bit like the good life around here, but we generally grow quite a lot of our own veg now, which is fabulous. We started cooking differently. We scratch cooked and we cut out over the time sort of meat and fish and dairy, and ultimately have now gone completely plant-based, vegan. And we did things like changing our bank and savings accounts, insurance, pensions, utilities, all of these, to try and reduce everything that we were doing as a family. But I really struggled because the industry that I was firmly ensconced in is still one of the biggest single use and therefore wasteful kind of industries and events ever, weddings. I mean, it's just all about one day. So I needed to do something differently. The wasteful nature of the wedding industry was just something that really I found really hard to stomach. So I kind of had two options, really. I either walk away, which was probably the easiest and most sensible option, or the other option was I do something about it, and I kind of went for that one. So I kind of decided I had to make the industry one that I could again be proud to be a part of, which has led me to where I am today. So my business at last count is threefold. Zoe Binning Limited is a wedding business and sustainability consultancy and freelance venue management service. Greenmanity is an eco-friendly and sustainable online wedding favours and gift shop. And Wild Roots Kitchen and Bar is a wedding, event and corporate catering company, all based here within South Wales. Now, over the years, I've just become increasingly aware, as I say, that the romance of the wedding industry has basically masked its wasteful nature. Every day when I was running weddings, I would be in the morning trawling in a whole load of plastic, largely tat, to set up for a wedding, and then shipping it out pretty much straight into the bin at the end of the night, day in, day out. And sometimes, because they were cheap and were only supposed to last one day, a lot of those items didn't even last the length of the day. So to give you some idea of scale, the average wedding generates in the UK now 14,500 kilograms of CO2, and that's just one day. To give you a bit of context, an average person driving a car for a whole year generates about 4,600 kilograms of CO2. And if you go for a meal in a restaurant, your meal generates around 8 kilograms of CO2. So 14,500 kilograms of CO2 every time a couple says I do is massive. So as a result, I combined my wedding venue business management and consultancy services with a real drive to develop sustainability and environmentally friendly wedding practices. I work with venues across South Wales predominantly to create more sustainable business models and to help them to start and maintain a conversation with wedding couples to bring their ideas of a socially responsible wedding to life, but for the venue still focusing on that bottom line. The industry is really slow to the party, but couples are starting to drive this now by seeking out better options and are starting to demand more from their venues and from their suppliers, who in turn are slowly starting to realise that having recyclable wrap for their flowers is not anywhere near close to being enough. So as an industry, if we're not meeting the demands of those clients, they're going to go elsewhere. Well, this basically led to Greenmanity launching. Now, Greenmanity is an eco-friendly and sustainable wedding favours and online gift shop, as I mentioned before. It's aimed at couples planning their weddings and struggling to make better ethical choices. So this is to give you an example of some of the things we do. Ultimately, less is more. We want our customers to choose better, longer lasting, reusable, well-made products. Everything we sell needs to be beautiful, plastic free, and have a use after their life on the wedding day. Or, in the case of edible goods and candles, break down to nothing, leaving no trace or negative impact once they've been used. Every product, every label, every item of packaging and source of supply is considered on its own merit. If something is pointless or will create waste, we won't stock it, even though we could definitely make more money if we did. There is a demand, but no one else is doing it. So for us, it just seemed the most obvious sort of next step in the world. Wild Roots Kitchen and Bar. So going back to that massive figure of 14,500 kilograms of CO2, the two main areas that generate that figure are travel, which in part comes down to the guests, where they're coming from, how many you invite, how they're getting there, but also the food. Wild Roots came about by working with wedding venues. We did it to provide a white label catering solution for small multifaceted venues that don't have their own in-house catering provision. And the idea was to tackle the lack of sustainability in wedding catering right here in South Wales. What do? Well, we deliver incredible cuisine for weddings, corporate dinners and private parties. We provide Welsh wedding venues with a white label catering solution, effectively being their in-house caterer. And since the start of COVID, when weddings kind of fell by the wayside, we also incorporated a corporate working lunch service as well, which we still now deliver to office board meetings and to individual delegates who are having Zoom meetings in their own home, and their food is then ready for them for their meeting. And we also create party boxes with or without alcohol as required. But who knew there was such a demand for more environmentally aware, amazing corporate catering? So why do we do it? Well, ultimately, as I mentioned in the previous slide, a large percentage of the carbon footprint of a wedding, and indeed our global carbon footprint, is food production. So I wanted to just give you here a couple of figures to demonstrate the scale. Forests cover 30% of the Earth's land. Agriculture is the leading cause of deforestation, and that is predominantly soy for animal feed and palm oil. The way we're going, rainforests could be wiped out, quite likely to be wiped out within the next 100 years. And the rate of deforestation is just massive. It's the equivalent of 30 football fields every single minute. Every single minute. Globally, more than 1.6 billion people rely on the forest resources for all or part of their livelihoods. Deforestation causes soil erosion and it causes flooding. 80% of the land animals and birds live in forests, so species like the orangutan, the Sumatran tiger, and many, many birds are threatened with this level of deforestation. And it's not just for animals. Cutting down trees directly adds carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and removes the ability to absorb existing carbon dioxide. So, how do we try and do it better? Well, basically, we have done our best. As a caterer, we work really hard with our suppliers to understand the process, the food miles, the source, and we buy as locally and as seasonally as we can. But it is an ever-evolving process. We're still learning all the time. We're still making changes all the time and finding out different ways of doing things. If we use fish, meat, and dairy, it needs to be good quality. And we want to know where it comes from, how it's fed. And we absolutely avoid products containing palm oil. All of our food is plant-based at its core. We reduce waste by not having to make too many different options. Why do we want to have different menus for vegans, for veggies, for dairy-free? Why not just create a really good quality food in the first place, whether that's mayo or chocolate brownies or whatever it may be? Packaging. Packaging is something that we work really hard. I've lost more hours of my life than I will ever get back to researching packaging. But we want packaging that can genuinely be composted and is recycled and is recyclable, but genuinely, as in our local waste facilities in our area can recycle it. There's so much greenwashing around when it comes to packaging, but that's a whole other presentation. We partner with Size Wales. For every sale we make, we plant a tree. Now, this isn't the solution. Reducing, reusing and avoiding what we don't need are preferable, but it is a start, and it is something that we can do in conjunction with our other changes and our other decisions. So back to my own why. Well, these two are my why. When things go bad, and I mean really bad, considerably worse than they are now, I'll be dead and long gone. The decisions that I make are for my children's future. I want them to have a beautiful planet to live on. I don't want them to be living on one that's burnt and ravaged, where every country and nation is working in its own silo, regardless of the consequences to other poorer nations. I want them to have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren without the fear of the consequences. And if that means I have to go out without fish, or fly less, or pay a bit more for things to ensure that that happens, well, I think that's a price worth paying. Thank you. Zoe Binning from Wild Roots Kitchen and Bar, Green Manatee, and Zoe Binning Limited.